Jai Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari. Gopijana Balaba Girivanadari. Gopijana Balaba Girivanadari. Jasodanandana Badrinarayan Jasodanandana Badrinarayan Jamunitira Vanatari Jamuna Tira Vanatari Jairaru Madhava Kunda Vihari. Gopijana Balaba Girivanadari. Gopijana Balaba Jasodanandana Badrinarayan Jamuna Tira Vanatari. Jamuna Tira Vanatari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Boom! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Whoa. Rama Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Boom! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Boom! Jai Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pri Vijakacharya Siddha Shisham His Divine Grace Abhaya Charan Bhakti Vedanta Sai Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Jagaguru Srila Prabhupada Ananta Guru Vaishya Brinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Shri Guru Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakti Brinda Ki Say Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Gordhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mathura Dham Ki Dwarka Dham Ki Navadip Dham Ki Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Ganga Maya Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Sambheda Bhakti Vinda Ki Srila Prabhupada Ki Sri Radha Giridhari Ki Shri Krishna Sankirtana Juga Ki Gopremanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Hey Bhakti, Mukunda, you can give this to Ed. Thank you very much, Bhakti. Ed, there's your, yeah. All's well, by Krishna's grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna Svedamo Bhagate Dhammaganadi Bisaha Kalaunasa Dashumesha Puranarko Nidodita Narayananamaskrichananam Shaivam Narottama Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat. Bhagavatam is Vrinda's son, is had risen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied with knowledge, religion, etc. Persons who have lost their vision to the dense darkness of the age of Kali should get light out of this Purana. Before beginning our study of the srimadbhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should first offer respects to the personality of God in Narayan, to the Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, the goddess and learning mother Saraswati, the author Srila Vyasadeva, and my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada. Before we start, I just thought I would share a old Christian story. You can gold from an unclean place, good, whatever, you can, different places. Because Balaram Prabhu was talking about the point that because we associate with each other, familiarity breeds contempt, and sometimes we don't see the other, how amazing is it this person is surrendered to Krishna and how they're serving Krishna nicely. We see, well, whatever. So, here's the story. It's an old medieval Christian story, parable. There was a monastery, and it was struggling. People weren't joining, things were tense, people weren't, so the neighbors weren't really supporting, it was going down. And a abbot from another monastery, who was known to be quite a saintly person, they thought, well, let's ask him. But he didn't say much. But as he was leaving, he turned to the monks at the struggling ashram, struggling monastery, and said, one thing is, one of you is the next Messiah. And then left. They were shocked, you can imagine. Oh, what is that all about, And then they began thinking, well, who is it? Natural thing, I think, is it that guy who was the gardener? I just thought he was just some Sudra working in the garden, but he's always singing Krishna's holy name. He's always thinking how to get nice flowers for the deity, and, making nice garlands for Radharani, and maybe it's him. Or Virgin Mary, sorry, we should update it. Stay in the context. But what about that cook, that big cook, but geez, he makes nice pizza, and he's always thinking how to make a nice menu for the monks, and maybe it's him. What about that? So they begin thinking, they begin seeing the good qualities in each other. And then, shock of shocks, they think, what if it's me? If it's me, I better shape up. I better come up to the standard. So when everyone started appreciating the good qualities in each other, and each started trying to become, Prabhupada said, we should become acharya-like. Not that we become, imitating, but following in the footsteps. The whole mood changed. And young people wanted to join. They thought, hey, geez, this is a happening place. And these monks, like, what is it, Karanda, when he saw the junk man, Jayananda going to the garbage, the temple garbage man is as blissful. Hey, imagine what the rest of the devotees, I'm jumping in, And the local people, they would come. They noticed the change, and they wanted to help. They wanted to support. So in this way, the whole thing turned around. So it is consciousness, and we should, and I'm speaking to myself, believe me, that, to see the good in others. And Prabhupada wrote me a letter, a famous analogy that Prabhupada would give. Anyone know the mind can see others like two, well, I'll just give you a big hint. Two insects. Anyone other than Dravida Prabhu know what one of those insects is? Anyone know? A fly. Okay, that one is a fly. And a bee. All right, very good. And where does the fly live? In Shangri-La? Nasty. I won't even go into it. Prabhupada says things unmentionable in the pages of Bhagavatam. So a fly lives in a nasty place. Where do you find a bee? Nice flowers, fragrant. It's always casing out. Where's the best flower? So Prabhupada said we have a choice. We can train the mind to be like a fly, or when you have to train it, we follow its natural. One devotee blooped. We used to call it bloop. Now they just kind of move out on the edge and come for the Sunday feast for free and criticize. But he envisioned himself as some kind of romantic poet. And when he left the message. Chamadagni. And he said, I know not where I goeth, but I'll be where the wind bloweth. I mean, maybe he's got a future at Hallmark, but he's not going to win the Nobel. But anyway, but if we just cast something in the wind, where does it wind up? A piece of paper, where does it wind up? It winds up in the gutter. So if you let the mind go, I know not where I goeth, but I'll be where the wind bloweth. If we don't, where does the mind go? It goes just like a fly. It goes to nasty things. So there it is. So, but if we make an effort and train the mind to be like a bee, then wherever we live is a nice place. Haridas Thakur is living with a snake, So I just wanted to mention, it's a nice parable, how we should, it begins, what is it? And Prabhupada would, Prabhupada would talk about Gandhi and say amongst politicians, he was a saint. Amongst saints, he was a politician. So I think that gives quite an accurate measure, But sometimes Prabhupada would quote Gandhi in a positive sense. And Gandhi used to say, be the change you want to be in the world. You want to change the world, where does it start? Right here. So there it is. I thought I would give a little add-on to Balaram's nice point yesterday. Okay, so we are on the 4th canto, chapter 25, text 35. Ete Sakaya Sokyo Me Nada Nayash Cha Manada Shuptayam Mayi Jagarti Nago Yam Palayam Purim Ete Sakaya sakyo me. Nada narascha mannada. Shaptayam maye jagarti. Nagoyam palayam purim. Ete sakaya sakyo me. Nada naryascha mannada. Suptayam maye jagarti. Nagoyam palayam purim. Ete sakaya sakyo me. Nada naryascha mannada. Suptayam maye jagarti. Nagoyam palayam purim. Ete sakaya sakyo me. Nada naryascha mannada. Suptayam maye jagarti. Nagoyam palayam purim. Ete sakaya sakyo me. Nada naryascha mannada. Suptayam maye jagarti. Nagoyam palayam purim. Ete sakaya sakyo me. Nada naryascha mannada. Suptayam maye jagarti. Nagoyam palayam purim. You want to try it, Mataji? Okay. Ete, all these. Sakaya, male friends. Sakya, female associates. Me, my. Nada, men. Narya, women. Cha, and. Manada, oh, very respectful one. Suptayam, while sleeping. Maye, I am. Jagarti, keeps awake. Naga, snake. I am this. Palayan, protecting. Purim, this city. So the lady is speaking to Paranjan, the king in the forest, and explaining herself. My dear gentlemen, all these men and women with me are known as my friends, and the snake, who always remains awake, protects this city even during my sleeping hours. So much I know. I do not know anything beyond this. Also you say, my dear gentlemen, all these men and women with me are known as my friends, and the snake, who always remains awake, protects this city, even during my sleeping hours. So much I know. I do not know anything beyond this. Paranjana inquired from the woman about those 11 men and their wives and the snake. The woman gave a brief description of them. She was obviously without full knowledge of her surrounding men and the snake. As stated before, the snake is the vital force of the living being. This vital force always remains awake even when the body and senses become fatigued and do no work. Even in the state of unconsciousness, when we sleep, the snake or the life force remains intact and awake. Consequently, we dream when we sleep. When the living entity gives up this material body, the vital force still remains intact and is carried to another material body. This is called transmigration or change of the body. And we have come to know this process as death. Actually, there is no death. The vital force always exists with the soul, and when the soul is awakened from so-called sleep, he can see his 11 friends, or the active senses, and the mind with their various desires, wives. The vital life force remains. Even during our sleeping hours, we can understand by virtue of our breathing process that the snake lives by eating the air that passes within the body. Air is exhibited in the form of breathing, And as long as breath is there, one can understand that a sleeping man is alive. Even when the gross body is asleep, the vital force remains active and alive to protect the body. Thus, the snake is described as living and eating air to keep the body fit for life. Om Agena Timirandasya Gena Gena Salakaya Jokshu Shrimadatam Gena Tazare Shi Gurave Namaha. So the queen is just playing in the forest. She's not, this much I know, that's it. And the material intelligence, it is like that. It is, well, we're having some interesting events here with the mind. Who are we? Where did we come from? What is the cause of life? Who is the I that is thinking my? Well, we just don't think about, I don't worry about these things. That my senses, and we'll get into it in a second, the 25 elements of Sankhya Yoga. But I just accept it as it is. And these are my friends. That to satisfy my senses, satisfy the mind, satisfy my false ego. This is my business. These are my friends. And this is all that matters. This all is all that is. So there it is. And I don't worry about it more. You have some kind of neurosis or whatever. You may have some armchair philosophy. Fine for you. But hey, eat, drink, and be merry. That's what I say. So, and they perfume it. They say, well, you know, you get your scientists who say, look, we only, and they say it with such arrogance and condescension that, well, we only, you know, we only accept as reality what we can measure, what we can see, taste, form, measure, reproduce. You have all these, you know, will-o'-the-wisp, you know, fantasy ideas you can dream on as you like. Fine. You know, play in that world. But I'm a realist. You know, I'm a hard tax guy. I face the facts. I have no romanticism in my life. Forget these emotions. Sariputa's favorite example, that there was one scientist who was trying to change the language, that we shouldn't say I feel pain, because when they get into trying to explain emotions, the guys at MIT, artificial intelligence, a computer is going to do it. It blows right out the window. They cannot explain emotions. Why, how, what's going on? So he says, no, just don't describe it. Don't say it like that. Don't say I feel. Say my C fibers are firing. That's an accurate analysis. That, you know, there's electrical impulse and it's traveling up the nerves and it's registering in the brain. So you're not feeling pain. That's your own romanticism that you've loaded onto the experience. Just say the truth. Your C fibers are firing. Of course, we all become, you know, robots. And what is the use of, you become like cockroaches. What's the use of life? And what kind of experience is that? You know, better to die. But anyway, so they perfume it. But that's basically just like it said here. Well, I know, what I can see, what I can measure, and therefore I just live within this little box. And I'm going to tell it again because it's a great joke. It's Sariputa's joke, and you can use it all the time because people get the picture. Joke goes like this. Man comes home at night. He's moved into the house. New, you know, track house. Only 4 models. Every 4 house looks the same. He has to call his wife to find out how to get home because all the houses look the same. It happens. So, but anyway, he gets there, and he notices that, you know, and everybody's got the driveway and that, you know, lined up and little lawn in front. The whole, you can picture the stereotypical scene. And he notices his neighbor is out by the curb under the spotlight on all 4s crawling around. So he's an altruistic person, our protagonist of the story. And he sees his neighbor crawling around on all 4s in the middle of the night under the street light. So he goes over and asks him, hey, what's up? Can I help you? So obviously you're in distress. And as soon as the man speaks, you know, he can understand the guy's pickled to the gills, you know, completely drunk as a skunk. And, you know, completely lost his bearings. So the man, the drunk, explains that I was trying to open my door in my house and I dropped my key. So I'm looking for my key. Our protagonist, our altruistic neighbor, says, well, you lost your key up there. It's nighttime, remember. Why are you over here under the street? You dropped it there. Why are you looking here? The guy says, oh, this is where the light is. Ha, ha, ha. So they look only where the light is. You're not going to find what you don't look for. If I say, hey, look, this is it. I've got horse blinders on, and this is all I can see. So that's the only reality. We've got Alex, we've got Mukunda, we've got Ed, and we've got Mataji here. And the rest of you don't exist. No prasad for you. No burritos for you. Well, are you going to accept that? Say, hey, Swamiji, We'll follow a lot of things, but when you mess with the prasadam, I'm sorry, you've stepped over the line, So they just look in a box. And that's it. All we can know, smell, taste, measure. I do, when I'm cooking sometimes, if I'm cooking in the evening, I do play BBC, just to catch, half hour, what's the news? It's one of my vices, sue me. But they had an astrophysicist on the other day. And, I cannot describe a bigger pile of horse manure. I'm sorry. Well, we think this, we used to think that, and and all they're getting back, I don't want to I actually have something else I want to get into, but, they've sent out this whatever it is, and it sends back impulses. Beep, 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 beep. That's all they get, radio, whatever they call it, but that's all they're really getting back. They're not even getting pictures. They have a computer that changes, but when you get really out into deep space, they're not even getting pictures. They're just getting impulses. Beep, 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 beep. And they create a whole picture. We've got a dwarf star that imploded, and we have plasma. They got all these fancy names. They don't know what the hell it is. They could have flashed past Narada Muni playing as Veena. And like 1, 2, 3 with Kartos. Beep, 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 beep. They don't know what's going on. So it's just such a bunch of hokum. So there it is. And she's calling these things my friends. But there's a famous letter Prabhupada wrote to someone I've already mentioned. And it's titled From Your, and Prabhupada signs off with a very sweet, whatever you call it, sign off, appellate. Your unknown friend. Who's he writing to? He writes to Gandhi and he says, you've accomplished what you got the Britishers out. Now you're just becoming, because the whole thing just evolved into nasty politics. It did not have a glorious ending, far from it, And ultimately he was pushed out and gave up in frustration. It's a whole story. But Prabhupada said, you should give it up. You've accomplished your task. Now absorb yourself in Bhagavad Gita, become a preacher, become a nice sannyasi. That will be good for you and good for the nation. And he signed it from your unknown friend. So, and ultimately, of course, the king dies. They get married. There's a whole romantic, there's a whole thing goes on as this allegory goes down the line in the Bhagavatam. But ultimately, Paranjana becomes a woman, Vidarbhi, and the king dies. She's all alone. Who appears? An unknown friend. Again, so we're talking about friends and unknown friends. So we think those friends are those that are titillate our senses or satisfy our mind. We were talking to those who flatter us, who make us feel comfortable. That's my friend. But no, there's an unknown friend, the super soul, Shastra, the Acharyas. These are our real friends who say, no, stop looking over here. It's over here. This is where real happiness, this is who you are. So I do, in the few minutes left, I want to read something else. And we have another, who's a classic example of a friend who rattled the cage of someone else in the first canto of Srimadbhagavatam, which is the summary of the Mahabharata. Who is someone who is, I'm going to give you such an easy hint. who was, as Prabhupada says in the purport, materially and spiritually blind. Oh, you raising your hands, Alec? Dhritarashtra. And who was his who was his unknown friend? Who was actually known to him? Who was his friend? And what did Vidura do? Did Vidura say, "Oh, very good, I'll teach you how to play golf"? Karandar told me this. Prabhupada was going for his morning walk and he saw a golf course. What is this? They said, "Oh, Prabhupada, they take a ball and a stick and they knock it into a hole 18 times." Prabhupada immediately analyzed it perfectly. He said, "It is simply organized for old men to waste time." It's exercise for old men. Now so many other people do, but generally, it was old men wasting time, knocking a ball around. What was I going to say? So he didn't praise him. He said, "You're living, from scraps from the Pandavas, especially Bhima, who you tried to kill. And your teeth are loose. You're going blind. You're a whole," and it's true. I'm at the cusp of it, but the body just falls apart. So many things don't work anymore. So, do you keep trying to, as I love to quote, I'm going to do it again. Who was it? Dylan Thomas, talking about old age, getting old. "Do not go gently into that long good night, but rage, rage, rage against the dimming of the light." Sounds romantic, doesn't it? The dimming of the light, you're getting old, so don't surrender to it. Just fight to the last breath. Rage, rage, rage. You're like Lear on the moor. You can rage till hell freezes over. You're not going to stop the tempest, the wind. Old age is coming, my friend, and it's going to snatch you away from everything you love. Oh, you're going to rage as long? Rage, 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 you idiot. How about you? Sage, sage, sage. Maharsh Pariksit, look for some saintly people to instruct you. What's going on here? So again, this, who are our real friends? One who instructs us, one who guides us. If we want to be a real friend to someone, of course we have to speak the truth. Austerity of speech. You speak the truth according to the Vedas, but what else needs to be done? In a way that's pleasing, We used to speak, the temple president used to give us a verse for the day. And that was when we would, this is Detroit, downtown. We were all brahmacharis fired up. And all businessmen, so many businessmen. Because, it was Ford Motor Company, General Motors, all that. It was Motor City. So a lot of businessmen. And and the verse of the day was Avajante Mam Mudha, that you're fools and rascals. And I remember I brought the van around to pick up the devotees, and practically every quarter you saw a brahmachari had some business guy by the tie. He was just laying into the guy that, you're a fool. And, it wasn't the most successful preaching strategy. But you have to speak the truth, but in a way that's palatable. That's intelligence. So who are our real friends? Our real friends are those who teach by example. That's a real friend, and who gives us good advice and encouragement. So there it is, not these senses in the mind and people, they're ancillary assistance. So, I think we have a few minutes more here. I just wanted to say something about Sankhya Yoga, and then I'll read what I wanted to read. Because it's not that the devotees don't have analytical intelligence. Well, you're just, believing these folk stories, and if you want to believe in God and in heaven, if it gets you through the night, and, assuages your fear of death, okay, fine, whatever, if that works for you. But, not for me. I'm a realist. But it's not that the devotees don't have analytical intelligence. We don't analyze the thing. You have Sankhya Yoga, which breaks the material world into 24 elements plus one. The fire, earth, fire, we understand the elements. We understand the knowledge-acquiring senses, the working senses. We understand the subtle mind, intelligence, focus, ego. What is it? Contaminated consciousness. But in other words, it's not just this. They take earth, fire, water, air, ether, and smash it into as many pieces as possible, put it on the, with the chemical chart, and there it is. And then you have the laws of physics. So here's what it is, and how does these elements interact. That's reality. But what about consciousness? What about the contaminated? What about false ego? What about the mind? What about all these, which everyone knows? Anybody here not have a mind? No. We've all got a mind. We've all got an ego. It's the very definition of ourself. The material reality changes. The external circumstances change. The physical body. Everything changes. But we still have a consciousness. That which is the very essence of ourself, they refuse to talk about. Well, we're not going to deal with that. What? I mean, I'm talking, they're over there under the light, and they're completely ignoring, because, well, that's what we can saw into little pieces. So the analytical intelligence is also there in the Vedic literature in the form of Sankhya Yoga. It understands material nature. But it goes, who am I and how am I interacting with the whole thing? And then when you get all those 24 elements in a big pot, what is the 25th element stirring it up? And it's not super soul, it's not Krishna. I mean, ultimate is. But what is it? Starts with a T. Time. And Krishna says, time I am. So mixing that whole brew, so there's a complete understanding of how the material nature is operating, what its different elements are. That is Sankhya Yoga. That is intelligence. You can look in that little dark corner of your chemical chart and think you know what reality is, but you're like that man under the street light. Okay, so what I wanted it talks about here that even when we're sleeping, because I do want to read a purport, and it's one of my favorite purports by Srila Prabhupada. Got a few minutes, we'll be all right. Because it's the same point which is being made in the first step in God realization in the Bhagavatam. Please note the title. What is the title of that chapter? I just said it. First step. Now, you can meet a saintly Vaishnava and immediately take the elevator and come to the right conclusion. But the whole point, well, let's say one of the key points of that section, first step in God realization, is to help the living entity understand that he, she, they are dependent. I'm dependent on the sun, Prabhupada says you worship a powerful thing. They worship a mountain, or they worship the ocean, or they worship lightning, or whatever it is. Some powerful physical manifestation. And then when something more powerful than me. And then when you analyze it, you realize, wait a minute, I'm dependent. I'm dependent. My son sent me a thing. You know that there's free divers now? They've gotten up to 18 minutes they can hold their breath. When I was around, it was those guys diving for pearls in the Persian Gulf, could hold their breath 6-7 minutes. No way, man. They're up to 18. Some guy has claimed 22 minutes, but it's not verified. I mean, they're going to come back as dolphins. Big accomplishment, But nobody, nobody lives under the water. So, the little incremental something, so what? But we're dependent. You can't even live without air. You can't live without water. You can't live without so many things. How is our food digesting? How is our hair growing? I mean, they are scratching their head. The more they look into it, Prabhupada said they can only understand things that are nearby and of medium size. He told Sadhaputta that. Nearby and medium size. And when they get into astrophysics, when they get out there, big size, the macro view, they don't, there it is, I already described that. And when they get into, quantum mechanics and they start looking at the tiny activities of the particles, they don't know why they appear to be conscious as if we're observing them. That's like, what? So they don't know what's going on. Big end or small end, they don't. And the fact of the matter is that we are dependent. So, well, there it is. I'm going to read what I wanted to read. It's one of my favorite. Because you want to talk about cold, hard analysis. Forget blind faith. They have blind faith. They start with axiomatic. That famous guy, forget his name, a real weasel. I'm sorry. Maybe he's dead. May he have a long life so he can reveal his foolishness. But he was describing, they have a mathematical description. To explain the nothingness from which everything came from, Sariputta points out, takes, 7 or 8 rooms of sliding boards of mathematics. So how everything came from nothing, I mean, that's a what do you call it, a oxymoron right there. But even you accept it, they say, full of faults, but let's just accept their initial premise. From the minute that tiny part, that singularity, infinitely small, infinitesimally dense, poof. And from that, because probably say, well, we're the chunk, Big Bang. Well, what caused it? We're that. So that they call it a singularity. And from that, and there's so many points. We're surrounded by points. Why this point and not that point? Why not all these points? That's a whole other. They don't even deal with that. But let's just accept one of these points. They say they can explain the math from that point. But what caused this point and not that point, and why did it go from inert to active? They have no idea. And you know what their answer is? I swear to you, give us one free miracle and we will explain the rest. Give us one fudge point. Let us, okay, well, it started. How it started, give us one free miracle. It started. They accept one, give us one axiomatic truth. It started. How it's, which is the primary question. Of course, you could also ask, it seems to be informed with knowledge. That unfolding in so many steps seems to be by design, but that's a whole other issue. But give us one free miracle, and we'll explain the rest. So they begin with an axiom. They begin with all kinds of parameters and limits. Well, we'll only accept what we can measure, taste, and... Well, what if you're limited and the absolute is unlimited? Then how in the world are you going to be able... How will the finite be able to understand the infinite? And if you say we'll only accept the infinite, then how in the finite, then how are you ever going to understand the infinite? I mean, by a priori, you've cut yourself off from reality. So they say that, well, you accept that there's a God and a soul, but we're just hard, cold truth. No, that's not a fact. Rather, the Vaishnava, and that's what I want to get into here in just a sec, rather the Vaishnavas are the ones who start from cold reality without any axiomatic assumptions. Jiva Goswami, Prabhupada said, the smartest person to ever walk on the planet. Prabhupada said, so many things. Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami begins the Sandarbhas, Sat Sandarbhas, that we all know, every living entity, each individual. What is it? I think, therefore I am. I exist. I'm not so sure about you. You might be a figment of my imagination. I'm not so sure about this world. Yeah, this whole thing could be a key, a pea on some huge entity's plate. I mean, I don't know what's happening out there. I don't really know about you either. I don't really know about this body. But I know that I have an individual consciousness. I think, therefore, I have a sense of self. I mean, that's everybody. You can start from that one common denominator. That doesn't require blind faith. That doesn't require any axiomatic, any assumptions. Don't go beyond it. I have a sense of self. Jiva Goswami says, seer, that's the individual. Seen, there's an external reality. I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't know how it's working. I don't know whether it's a figment of my mental, but it's there. Seer, seen, act of seeing. Okay, there's no sentiment. And from that point, okay, well, what is evidence? And he describes all the different types of evidence and all the faults, and ultimately you come to Shabda Brahman. If you want to understand that which is beyond, you have to come, what is Shabda Brahman? You have to hear, ultimately. And he makes the basis of the Vedas. He goes through all the Vedas. And ultimately, you have to come to Bhagavatam. If you want to understand reality, you will find the best pramana, the best evidence, the best explanation of existence in the Bhagavatam. So I just wanted to read this. This is one of Prabhupada's purports, starting from that first step of God realization that we are dependent. It's described here in this purport. I go to sleep, I wake up, the snake is maintaining me. We count on waking up. You don't. If anybody here, you take a nap, you think, well, geez, I better get Balaram to wake me up because I may die. I may just sleep forever. I got to have somebody wake me up. I'm going to wake up. I set an alarm clock. I'm going to wake up, you know. So we're dependent in so many ways. So here's Prabhupada's purport. This is the second canto, second chapter, text 35. The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. You know, two birds in a tree. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized on our act of seeing and taking help from intelligence. Taking help from intelligence. We're dependent. We take help. You know, and Prabhupada explains. It's fantastic. And I'll just read this and we'll be done. The general argument of the common man is that since the Lord is invisible not visible to our eyes, how can one either surrender unto him or render trance to the loving service? I can't see it. I'm not going to believe it. What is this all about? To such a common man, here is a practical suggestion given by Srila Sukadeva Goswami as how one can perceive the Supreme Lord by reason and perception. This is, you know, a connect the dots progression from just, okay, I exist, I'm looking out, there's a seer seen, active seeing, I think, therefore I am, okay. From that point, Prabhupada brings us to devotional service in one purport. It's just profound. Okay. Actually, the Lord is not perceivable by our present materialized senses. But when one is convinced of the presence of the Lord by practical service attitude, there is a revelation by the Lord's mercy. And such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. Okay, well, fine. You get Krishna's mercy and you'll understand. But how do we get there? Prabhupada says, he, meaning Krishna, can perceive that intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The presence of Paramatma in everyone's company is not very difficult to realize, even for the common man. The procedure is as follows. Here we go. So we are getting help from our intelligence at every how to move, how to function. At every moment we are getting help. How to just step. So here it is. One can perceive one's self-identification and feel positively that he exists. Okay, here I am. I exist. Okay, I'll agree with that. He may not feel it very abruptly, but by using a little intelligence, he can feel that he's not the body. He can feel that the hand, legs, head, hair, and limbs are all his bodily parts and parcels, but such hand, leg, and head cannot be, I think we'll end here, identified with his self. Therefore, just by using intelligence, he can distinguish separate his self from other things as he sees it. Because we are over time, I'm going to end here, and we will pick up in the next class. But it starts from that, I have a sense of self, and I'm not this body, and I'm dependent. What? Okay, where do we go? Just by a little intelligence. So this purport by Prabhupada, we'll walk it through next time, because I don't want to rush it. It's just anyone who thinks or makes the claim that you guys are sentimental and you're just hiding in blind faith, or that, whatever it may be, tries to find some fault in the Bhagavatam or fault in the Acharyas, they are in the darkness like that. They're drunk. They're intoxicated with their own illusory pride. Okay, so we'll end there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.